Hey everyone, welcome to this deep dive, all about advantage entrepreneurship. You sent in a couple of sources, right?
Yeah, looks like it.
One is this guide, aritien.pdf.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this other one, 2chip. Like notes from a presentation, maybe.
Yeah, it could be. Seems like they're both about, building a business around what you're already good at.
That's the plan for today. We'll dig into how to figure out what your strengths are, how to get your name out there, and yeah, even think about turning those skills into some income.
One thing that really struck me about these sources, they both kind of move away from that old idea of find the perfect job.
Oh, interesting.
They're more about thinking of your skills as tools, understanding that those skills can create value, and that can actually lead to income in ways you might not have thought of before.
So not just trying to fit into some job description that's already out there,
Right.
but seeing what you're good at as something valuable in itself, and then figuring out how that could work for you.
Exactly. It's recognizing that you have something unique to offer, even if you don't have a fancy title or 1 million followers.
Right, I get you.
Both sources talk about this cold media era idea where you don't need to be a celebrity to have influence.
Right, that's less intimidating for sure.
You can just become a recognized expert in whatever your little corner of the world is.
I see where you're going with this. It's like if you're putting out good stuff consistently in one area that you really know,
Yeah.
people start seeing you as the go-to person for that.
Exactly. It feels much more doable than trying to be some huge social media star, right?
Totally. It's like, hey, I might not be famous, but I know my stuff.
Exactly. It's all about building a reputation for quality and expertise. And then the Kahoo source, it takes this even further.
Oh, okay.
It talks about these three pillars of advantage entrepreneurship.
All right, I'm intrigued.
They use these Chinese terms,
Yeah.
Ming, Shang, and Li.
Okay, breakdown time. I'm sure some folks listening might not be familiar with those.
Sure. So Ming, that's all about prestige. Your reputation, the weight your name carries,
Gotcha.
Shang is focused on influence, reaching people, having an impact.
Makes sense.
And then Li is tied to profit, material gain.
Interesting. So how do they all fit together?
Well, if you look at the visual in this source, influence is right in the middle. It's like the central, most important piece.
So the foundation for the other two.
Yeah, I think so. It makes sense, right? If you've got influence, it's easier to build a good reputation.
Right. And if people trust you, they're more likely to buy what you're selling.
Exactly. Influence becomes this bridge between the value you create and the profit you generate.
Okay, so the big question is, how do you build that influence?
That's the million-dollar question. What can you actually do to become that trusted voice in your field?
Well, luckily, both of these sources have some pretty cool ideas about that. Let's start with building prestige, which Shin really links to consistent output.
Right.
They talk about this 100 challenge, which I gotta say, sounds intense.
100 pieces of content in a year.
Yeah. Is that even realistic
That's
for
right.
someone who's working a full-time job or juggling other stuff?
It's a good question. I think it's meant to be a thought experiment to get you thinking about consistently sharing your knowledge.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be 100 blog posts or videos. It could be social media updates, comments in forums, even just showing up in conversations regularly.
So it's the mindset more than the exact number.
Right. And remember, quality over quantity. Better to have 10 great things than 100 mediocre ones.
That's true for pretty much everything, I think.
But the key is consistency. Showing up and making it a habit to share what you know.
I like that.
Yeah.
Even if you're not writing whole articles every day, just staying engaged in your niche
Yeah.
keeps you top of mind for people.
Exactly. Builds that recognition over time. And you don't have to do it alone either.
True, you can collaborate, join communities.
Exactly. Use different platforms to amplify your reach.
True. Builds that know, like, and trust factor.
Mhm. Super important nowadays. And speaking of seeing real results from that effort.
Oh, yeah. Tier had that awesome story about YJ, the student who made visual notes,
Just like what we do on the show.
and ended up getting a book deal with a huge publisher.
What a dream come true.
Right. It shows that consistency can really pay off, even if you're not a big name yet.
YJ's story is a perfect example of that. It shows that you don't need to be super famous or have tons of followers to get noticed. You just need to create good stuff that resonates with the right people.
It's so inspiring. But with so many people making content these days, how do you stand out?
That's where positioning comes in. Both sources mention it. It's not just making content, it's making content that's different, memorable.
Oh, yeah. I remember struggling with that when I was starting out as a visual thinking coach. There were so many others out there.
Right. So how'd you figure out what made you special?
It took a while, but it was really about understanding my own strengths, my background, combining that with what I was passionate about.
So not trying to be everything to everyone, but finding your own lane.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so cool about this advantage entrepreneurship idea. It's not about fitting a mold. It's about using your own strengths, your own experiences to make something valuable.
I love that. That's the message I want our listeners to really grab onto.
Think about your background, what you're good at, what you love.
That's your starting point for building prestige. And from there, the possibilities are endless.
Okay, so we've talked about consistent output, finding your niche. But Escher calls expanding influence the central pillar of advantage entrepreneurship. What does it even mean to be influential, and how do you actually get there in a way that feels genuine?
Great question. And that's something we'll dive into right after. Wait, we're not doing breaks, are we?
Nope, straight through.
All right, then let's keep rolling. Influence, here we come. So influence, it's not about like tricking people or being pushy.
Right, for sure.
It's more about building real connections, becoming someone people trust. And sure, it talks about this cool concept, being a, what do they call it? A human network node.
A human network node. Okay, that sounds kind of technical. What's that all about?
It's actually pretty simple. It's connecting people who could help each other out.
Okay.
You're like the hub, linking people with shared interests, skills that complement each other, or maybe even could collaborate.
So it's less about constantly promoting myself.
Right.
And more about being a facilitator, someone who brings people together, and value comes from those connections.
Exactly. And, this can be really good for people who aren't comfortable with, like, traditional self-promotion.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's a more low-key way to build influence.
Yeah, you're genuinely helping others, fostering those connections.
And if you're consistently doing that, adding value to people's lives, you naturally become someone they think of in your field.
Right, that reputation of being helpful, knowledgeable, well-connected.
So how does this human network node idea tie into altruism? The sources mentioned that too.
It does. It mentions Eric's book, Inner Strength, which is all about, like, giving without expecting anything in return.
Right.
Being a human network node, it kind of embodies that. You're not thinking, what can I get? It's how can I help?
And then often the rewards just show up naturally.
Exactly. It's not even about expecting them. It's just creating a positive ripple effect through genuine connection.
What goes around comes around.
Yeah.
Right. But in this case, you're not even thinking about that coming around part. It's just about the giving.
Yeah. And the sources have a couple more tips for being an effective node, so to speak. They talk about, first, figuring out who your ideal target audience is. They call it your TA.
So not just networking with anyone and everyone.
Right. It's being more selective, building relationships with folks who align with, like, your values, your interests.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the other tip?
It's being mindful of the impression you make. And this isn't just about your professional expertise, right?
It's about how you interact with people.
Exactly. The energy you bring, how you make people feel.
It's true. People remember how you make them feel more than what you said sometimes.
Absolutely. So yeah, building genuine influence, it's not a quick fix. It takes time and effort. But by, giving value, fostering those connections, being authentic, you can build a really strong network, one that supports your growth and helps you succeed.
This human network node idea is great, especially for folks like me who aren't super comfortable with, like, tooting your own horn all the time.
Right.
But what about turning all this effort into actual profit?
Ah, yes. The lie part, the profit piece.
Yeah. That's where I'm curious how it all ties in.
Well, the Tethel.pdf source gets into that. It has a really practical formula for turning your passions and skills into income.
All right, lead on me.
It's about combining what you love, what you're good at, and what you know with solving other people's problems.
Simple, but powerful. It's like finding that sweet spot where your passions and skills can make a difference.
And they break it down further. It's a 3-step process. Defining your value, accumulating it, and then realizing it.
Can you unpack those a bit?
Defining value means, like, what are you uniquely good at? And how can that solve problems for others?
Gotcha.
Accumulating value is about honing those skills, getting better, creating a body of work that shows what you can do.
Makes sense.
And then realizing value is where you turn all that into something tangible. Products, services, things you can get paid for.
So taking what you love, what you're good at, and packaging it up in a way that people will pay for.
Exactly. There are tons of ways to do that depending on, your skills, your audience. We could do a whole episode just on business models and stuff.
Ooh, future episode idea.
Yeah.
But for now, let's circle back to something both sources talked about. Transferable skills.
Right. Those are key in today's world. And JustShowJolly.pdf has this great quote from Jeff Bezos. He talks about focusing on what doesn't change.
Interesting.
It's about figuring out those core skills, those principles that'll always be valuable, no matter what happens with technology or whatever industry you're in.
So invest in the things that transcend specific jobs. What are some examples? How can our listeners figure out what those are for them?
Great question. Let's dive into that. So those transferable skills, think about things like communication, being able to get your ideas across clearly,
Yeah, makes sense.
Both writing and speaking, problem solving is a big one too. Can you spot challenges, break them down, come up with creative solutions? Then there's leadership, even if you're not managing people officially.
Right.
Do you inspire others? Take initiative, drive projects forward.
Sounds like these are valuable no matter what you do, not just for entrepreneurs.
Exactly. And being adaptable, that's huge. How well do you adjust to new situations? Learn new tech, embrace change, and then just the willingness to learn in general. Are you curious? Always wanting to expand your knowledge, looking for new info, new perspectives.
I'm hearing a theme here. It's not just about technical skills.
Right.
It's about your attitude towards work, towards life.
It's that growth mindset.
Yeah.
Always willing to learn and grow.
I love that.
Oh, and being a team player, that's up there too. Collaborating well, communicating openly, contributing to a positive environment.
Right.
Time management. Can you prioritize?
Yeah.
Hit deadlines, manage your workload.
Those are all things that anyone would want in an employee or a client.
For sure. It's like transferable skills are the foundation for building a good career, a good business. So how can people use those skills to create more opportunities?
Well, we already talked about one way, right? Yeah. Becoming that human network node.
Exactly. Connecting people. But remember, it's not about being selfish. It's about being helpful, creating value for everyone involved.
Be a giver, not a taker. But how do you even find those connections in the first place?
The sources suggest going to industry events, even virtual ones, joining online communities for whatever you're interested in, and even just reaching out to people you admire.
Oh, interesting.
Requesting those informational interviews,
Yeah.
asking questions, showing that you're genuinely curious.
I like that. It's all about being authentic, actually interested in the other person.
For sure. Networking doesn't have to be scary or transactional. It can just be like having a conversation, finding things in common.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't forget about giving back to your community, sharing what you know, whether it's blog posts, social media, volunteering.
It all builds your reputation.
Exactly. Establishes you as a thought leader, attracts people who vibe with your work.
It's like planting seeds.
Yeah.
Right. You never know which ones will grow into something amazing. But the more you put yourself out there, the more chances you create.
And nowadays, you got to have that online presence. The sources talk about having a website, a blog.
Right, your central hub.
And being active on social media, the platforms that make sense for you.
Show off your expertise, make it easy for folks to find you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's got to be genuine, reflecting who you are, what you're about. Don't be someone you're not, just to follow the latest trend.
Be yourself. Share good stuff that your audience will actually connect with.
It's about building trust, credibility online, just like you would in person.
And it's ongoing. Got to keep showing up, engaging, nurturing those relationships.
Consistency is key with everything it seems.
Speaking of ongoing, the sources also emphasize continuous learning.
Yeah, the world keeps changing, so you got to keep up.
The only constant is change, right? If you're not growing, you're falling behind. But with everything moving so fast, how do you even know what skills to learn?
Good point. It's a lot to keep track of.
Well, it's important to pay attention to trends, follow thought leaders in your field, see where you could expand your knowledge.
Makes sense.
Conferences, workshops, even virtual ones, online courses, books, articles, anything relevant to what you're interested in.
So many resources out there. You don't have to go back to college or anything.
And don't forget about mentors, coaches, finding someone who's already done what you want to do. That can be super valuable.
All right, we've covered a ton in this deep dive.
We have.
What's the one big takeaway you want folks to walk away with?
I want them to realize they have more power than they think. You don't have to wait for permission or follow some set path. Create your own opportunities, use your skills, build a career or business that you actually care about.
So inspiring.
These sources, they're like a roadmap, but you're the one driving.
Whether you're trying to start a full-blown business or just find more creative ways to use your skills.
Yeah.
The power is in your hands.
Exactly. And these sources we talked about today, they give you a framework for doing just that. It starts with recognizing what your advantage is and then taking action.
So here's a challenge for everyone listening. What's one skill or one area you know a lot about that you could focus on for your own 100 challenge?
Ooh, good one.
And who's someone you could connect with today that would be good for both of you?
Great questions to think about. Even small steps can lead to big things over time. Start small, be consistent, trust the process.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep dreaming big. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.